All right, welcome back to Bio 1. Today we're going to go through Chapter 7. So that's Chapter 7 from the Simon et al. Book. And we're going to be focusing on photosynthesis. We're going to be looking at the process of photosynthesis, talking about what it is, what it does, why it's important, and then what the actual process of photosynthesis looks like at the cellular level. And so photosynthesis, why are we talking about photosynthesis? What is, so important about photosynthesis? Well, if you trace nearly all of the energy used by living organisms, it can be traced back to one main source, which is the energy that comes from the sun. And how does that energy from the sun actually make it into our ecosystems, and how is it that it is able to be used in living organisms? Well, that all comes from the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process used by specific organisms like plants, algae, so protists, and some bacteria. Basically, what photosynthesis is it is a process that transforms the energy in light, so that light energy, into a form of chemical energy. So energy that exists in organic compounds. And the chemical energy is specifically stored in the bonds of those organic compounds. So it's the bonds that exist in sugar molecules, so carbohydrates. The process of photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight as the starting materials, and it releases oxygen gas as a byproduct. And so the reason we can trace all of the energy, not all of it, but most of the energy that living organisms use back to the sun is because the energy from the sun is converted into kind of this chemical organic energy through the process of photosynthesis, and then that energy is incorporated into those organisms, so plants, algae, and bacteria, and then your consumers, your carnivores, your heterotrophs, all of those organisms then consume that material, and it just kind of goes up the food web. And so photosynthesis is kind of the base of converting that solar energy into useful organic energy. So the basics of photosynthesis is that it is a process that occurs in organisms called autotrophs. And so these organisms are generating their own energy. They don't have to consume other organic molecules in order to generate their own energy. There are different kinds of autotrophs. We're going to focus on photoautotrophs for this chapter because we're specifically interested in photosynthesis. And photoautotrophs are the organisms that undergo photosynthesis, and these are the primary producers for most of the ecosystems that you find around the world. And so, like we mentioned, almost all organisms can trace their source of energy back to the sun, and this is like a key principle that's really illustrating the ability to transform energy and matter, and why it's so important for living organisms on Earth. And like I mentioned, there are different kinds of autotrophs. Another type of autotroph would be chemoautotrophs. And so that's organisms that use things like hydrogen sulfide in organic compounds to generate their own chemical energy. But like I said, we're going to focus on photoautotrophs, which are using sunlight, solar radiation, to generate their own energy. So here's some examples of photosynthetic autotrophs. So you have plants, so all of the plants shown in this forest. You have protists, like this kelp that's shown here. And then you have some cyanobacteria, that's aquatic, with these two being aquatic-based organisms. phytoplankton, all of those. That's an example of photoautotrophs. So there are lots of examples of photoautotrophs. And one of the things that we kind of correlate with photosynthesis is green, right? So the color green, we think of green as being the color of photosynthesis, and that's primarily because the site of photosynthesis exists at the chloroplasts. And the chloroplasts are these organelles that we find in plant cells that are the light absorbing organelles. And this is where the process of photosynthesis happens. And you generally find chloroplasts in the interior portion of the leaves themselves. And we see the color green, so chlorophyll shows up as the color green because that is actually the color of light that they reflect. So all of the light waves have a specific wavelength, and chlorophyll absorbs the wavelengths of the visible spectrum of all the other colors except for green, and so it reflects that green wavelength, and so that green wavelength is the color that we see. So that's why chloroplasts appear as green colors. Okay, so since we said that the chloroplasts are found in leaves, and that's their primary location, so that's the site where photosynthesis is happening. So the leaves is where the plants are performing photosynthesis. And remember, we said that there are a couple of things that plants need, or autotrophs need, in order to photosynthesize. That's carbon dioxide, that's water, and that's sunlight. Well, how do you get carbon dioxide and into the plant so that it can convert that carbon dioxide into glucose? Well, the leaves have what's called stomata. These are basically tiny pores where carbon dioxide will go into the leaf and oxygen will exit the leaf. And the membranes on the chloroplasts is where the photosynthesis actually happens. So you have the chloroplasts in the leaves themselves. So here's a cross section of a leaf. You have all of the chloroplasts in here, so those photosynthetic cells. On the bottom of the leaf, which is typically where all of the stomata are located, you have carbon dioxide going in and oxygen coming out. Now that carbon dioxide is going to go and diffuse into the chloroplasts where photosynthesis will happen. Okay, so if we zoom in to say one chloroplast, right, which is this structure here, we can look at that single chloroplast and we can notice a few things. That chloroplast is a double membrane structure. It's made up of stacks of membranes. These stacks are called granum, and each kind of pancake looking structure in that stack is called a thylakoid. Okay, and then all of the space around those granum or grana is called the stroma. So if we look at a micrograph of a chloroplast molecule, we have the granum, the individual thylakoids, and then all of this kind of clear yellow space is the stroma. Okay, and so what's interesting with this chloroplast is that it is a double membrane structure. Okay, and like we said, that inner membrane holds stroma, and that stroma is that thick fluid. And in that fluid, in that stroma, you have those stacks of thylakoids, and those thylakoids are also membranous sacs. And then the stacks of those thylakoids are called grana. Okay, And so this chlorophyll molecule is what's actually capturing the light energy that photosynthesis is using to convert carbon into glucose. Okay. And so the overall process of photosynthesis is that you have carbon dioxide and water that generates glucose and oxygen. And what's important to notice about the formula for photosynthesis is that it is the reverse of cellular respiration. So cellular respiration takes glucose and oxygen and makes ATP and gives off carbon dioxide and water. And then, so that's through metabolic process of cellular respiration. And so basically, the waste products of the products of photosynthesis are the reactants of cellular respiration and vice versa. So for photosynthesis, you have carbon dioxide and water with light energy giving you glucose, which is your sugar molecule, and oxygen. Whereas cellular respiration takes that sugar molecule and oxygen and breaks it down to give you ATP, and you release carbon dioxide and water in the process. Okay. Okay. And so that's it for our first part of photosynthesis, where we kind of just look at the basics and an overview of photosynthesis. Now, in the next video, we're going to go through the actual process of photosynthesis, and we're going to look at what's called the light reactions and the light independent reactions, or what's also known as the Calvin cycle. So we will see you in that video.